The millionaire looks at the man's belt buckle and is shocked by what she sees. Emma Wallace was the epitome of success. At 34, she had everything most people only dream of. A luxurious penthouse overlooking Manhattan, an enviable career as the CEO of a multinational corporation, and a network of contacts that ranged from magnates to renowned artists. But behind the tinted glass windows and the flawless high heels was a woman who felt profoundly alone. Emma had built her life on dedication and sacrifice. She had buried herself in books and ambition, determined to create a life where she would never have to depend on anyone. Yet, despite the gleam of her professional success, the emptiness in her heart grew larger. Her relationships were shallow, filled with people drawn to her for what she could offer. That was why she had vowed never to let anyone get too close. But lately, that isolation was beginning to weigh heavily on her. Before continuing, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. That morning, an invitation to a gala arrived in a golden envelope. It was one of the most coveted events of the year, promising to gather the biggest names in American society. Emma looked at the invitation and felt a mixture of exhaustion and sadness. She had attended countless events like this before, always playing her role as the sophisticated, successful woman, yet always alone. This time, something inside her screamed that it had to be different. Perhaps it was the weight of the years or the recent bouts of insomnia that had her reflecting on what truly mattered in life. Emma decided she wouldn't attend the gala alone. For the first time, she wanted someone by her side, someone to share laughter and stolen glances with, without the shadow of suspicion that they were only interested in her wealth. The following evening, Emma prepared herself with her usual meticulousness, but this time, there was a different purpose behind it. She had decided to visit the quiet bar she frequented in Manhattan, a place where no one seemed to recognize her as the powerful Emma Wallace, CEO of Wallace Enterprises, but simply as another woman seeking a bit of solace after a long day. As she adjusted the final details in the mirror, she studied her reflection. Her features were elegant and refined, but her eyes betrayed a profound weariness. She sighed, grabbed her Italian leather purse, and headed toward the bar. During the drive, her thoughts kept drifting back to the golden invitation on her office desk. The event was in 3 days, and her desire to find someone to accompany her grew stronger by the minute. But it couldn't be just anyone. It had to be someone who saw her as Emma, not as the untouchable millionaire. When she arrived at the bar, the familiar atmosphere welcomed her like an embrace. The soft lighting, the time-worn wooden tables, and the gentle jazz playing in the background always made Emma feel at home. She greeted the bartender with a discreet nod. He knew her well, and chose a stool in the corner of the counter. She ordered a martini, as she always did, but her mind was elsewhere. She watched the few patrons scattered around the room, searching for someone who seemed genuine, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was looking for. Then he walked in. Liam Carter had a presence that effortlessly drew attention. Tall, with slightly tousled brown hair and deep blue eyes that exuded both intensity and kindness, he made his way to the bar and ordered a whiskey, sitting just a few seats away from Emma. She immediately noticed that he didn't seem like a regular at this place, yet he didn't look out of place either. It was as though he carried an aura that adapted seamlessly to any environment. Liam glanced at her casually and, with an easy smile, broke the silence. "Rough night?" he asked, his voice deep and calm. Emma, caught off guard by his approach, returned a faint smile. Something like that. The conversation started off light but quickly veered into something more meaningful. Liam seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say, without the haste or superficiality she had grown so accustomed to. He shared snippets of his life, how he had grown up on a farm in Ohio and had moved to New York to broaden his horizons. Emma spoke briefly about her work, careful not to divulge her true position. When Liam asked what she did, she offered a vague response. "I manage a few things here and there." Time slipped by unnoticed, and before Emma realized it, The bar was nearly empty. Liam chuckled. "I think we've talked longer than I planned. You're really good at keeping someone's attention." She blushed faintly, something she hadn't done in years. Before leaving, Liam surprised her with an invitation. "How about dinner tomorrow? It seems like we have a lot more to talk about." Emma hesitated for a moment, but there was something about his easygoing nature that made her agree. Then she decided to be honest. "Actually, I need a favor. There's an important event in 3 days, and I'd like you to be my +1. Liam raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "A formal event? Don't you think that might be a little strange? We barely know each other." Emma smiled. "It might be, but sometimes the most unexpected things turn out to be the best." He nodded, agreeing with one condition. "I'll do it because you said you need company, but don't expect much from me in terms of glamour." Emma laughed, and as she walked out of the bar, she felt something unfamiliar. Hope. On the day of the event, Emma woke early, a mix of nerves and excitement coursing through her. As she arranged the final details of her schedule, her thoughts kept drifting to Liam. He was unlike anyone she had ever met before. Genuine, funny, and above all, unpretentious. It was hard to believe that a stranger from a quiet bar could make such an impact on her mind and, in some small way, her heart. By late afternoon, she slipped into an elegant black haute couture gown adorned with subtly sparkling stones that perfectly complemented her figure. Her hair was swept into a classic chignon, and she chose minimalist jewelry that reflected her sophisticated personality. When she looked at herself in the mirror, for a fleeting moment, Emma saw something different. It wasn't just her flawless beauty. There was something in her eyes, a spark of excitement, as though this night marked the beginning of something she couldn't quite define. At exactly 7 o'clock, Emma stepped into the limousine that would take her to Liam's address. The driver opened the door for her, and as the car moved through New York's bustling streets, Emma gazed out the window, lost in thought. When they arrived, she adjusted her dress and stepped out of the car. She was ready to face anything, but not what she saw. Liam was descending the stairs of the modest building he called home, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. The fit accentuated his broad shoulders and confident posture. His hair was styled neatly but retained a casual touch that seemed intrinsic to him. When he saw her, he paused on the last step, his eyes fixed on her for a moment before letting out a soft wow. Emma smiled, feeling a flush of warmth creep into her cheeks. "You look amazing," he said as he took the final step to meet her. She thanked him, returning the compliment sincerely. "So do you. It's like you were born to wear a tuxedo." On the way to the event, their conversation was lighthearted, punctuated by exchanged glances that spoke volumes beyond words. Emma felt something she hadn't in years: ease. Liam, meanwhile, saw in Emma something more than the polished, sophisticated woman everyone else knew. There was a hidden vulnerability that intrigued him. When they arrived at the grand entrance of the luxurious ballroom, all eyes turned toward them. Emma was used to the attention, but Liam seemed momentarily out of place. She noticed and subtly touched his hand for a brief moment, as if to say, "You're not alone." He smiled, and that small gesture was enough to steady him. Throughout the evening, they mingled with the crowd of high society figures. Liam stayed by Emma's side, observing and interacting with a natural ease that impressed her. When they found moments alone, he made witty remarks about the conversations around them, drawing genuine laughter from Emma, a rare occurrence at events like this. There was something extraordinary about that night. Their connection seemed to deepen with every shared glance and word, like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their place. Emma felt the emptiness in her heart begin to lessen, even if only slightly. The evening unfolded with an unexpected lightness. Emma and Liam moved through the crowd like longtime partners, even though they both knew how little they truly knew about each other. Soft music played in the background, while guests split their attention between conversations, restrained laughter, and glasses of champagne. Liam, ever observant, noticed the eyes of the elite following them. It didn't intimidate him, but it was a world completely foreign to him. He leaned toward Emma and whispered, "Do they always look at you like that?" Emma held back a smile and replied with playful irony, "Get used to it. Being my +1 has its challenges." Her response drew a quiet laugh from Liam, and for the first time, Emma felt truly at ease in an environment that usually demanded perfection. At one point, they drifted away from the crowd, finding a quieter corner of the ballroom near an open balcony. The cool night air provided a refreshing contrast to the heat of the spotlights inside. Liam leaned casually against the balustrade while Emma, holding a champagne flute, gazed out at the glittering city below. He watched her silently, captivated by the way she seemed to balance strength and vulnerability in every movement. "Why did you choose me?" Liam asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Emma shifted her gaze from the city lights to meet his eyes. "I needed someone who didn't know who I am. Someone real." The honesty in her voice left Liam silent for a moment. "And you're real," she added with a timid smile. Liam tilted his head, surprised by her response. "Well, that's quite the responsibility. I hope I don't let you down." She chuckled softly, her eyes lingering on him, realizing there was indeed something about Liam that set him apart from every other man she had ever met. It was his simplicity, his lack of pretense, that made her feel both safe and a little unsteady. Back in the ballroom, they were invited to join a table with other prominent business figures. It was a game Emma knew well. Polite smiles, strategically guided conversations, subtle displays of power. Liam, however, seemed unaffected by the unspoken dynamics. He answered questions naturally, without any attempt to impress, and his authenticity seemed more captivating than any ostentatious display. Emma felt a quiet pride in having him by her side. When the band began to play a soft, slow tune, Liam stood and extended his hand to Emma. "I thought you weren't a tuxedo guy. Don't tell me you can dance too," she teased as she rose. "Believe it or not, I learned from my mom. She used to say no one trusts a man who doesn't know how to lead a dance." They moved to the dance floor. Liam led with a steady but gentle confidence, and Emma found herself surprised by the warmth blossoming in her chest, something she couldn't quite name. The music seemed to fade into the background, leaving just the two of them at the center of it all. "Are you enjoying the night?" he asked, looking into her eyes as they turned together. "More than I ever expected," she admitted, the sincerity of her words catching even her off guard. When the evening finally came to an end, Emma glanced at Liam as he stood beside her while she said her goodbyes to a few acquaintances. He looked tired but at ease, as though he'd found himself unexpectedly comfortable in this unfamiliar world. In the car, on the way back to Emma's place, the silence between them felt effortless. Liam stared out the window, watching the city glide by, while Emma quietly observed him in the glass reflection. "Thank you for tonight," she said, breaking the silence. "You made everything different." Liam smiled, replying without hesitation, "Thank you for trusting me to stand by your side." What he didn't say, but deeply felt, was that the evening had changed something within him. There was a strength in Emma that inspired him, but also a fragility he wanted to protect. When the car stopped in front of Emma's building, Liam opened the door before the driver could react. He extended his hand to help her out. A simple gesture, but one that made her smile. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, feeling the cool night breeze against her skin, she looked at him, hesitating. "Would you like to come up for a drink?" The question sounded more casual than she had intended, but deep down, Emma knew the invitation carried a deeper significance. Liam held her gaze for a moment, as if weighing his options, before smiling. "I'd like that, as long as you promise not to serve me something I can't pronounce." Emma laughed and motioned for him to follow her. As they entered the penthouse, Liam couldn't hide his surprise. The decor was modern, featuring neutral tones and minimalist furniture, but what stood out the most was the panoramic view of New York City. He walked to the large window, where the city lights seemed to dance in the distance. "This is definitely another world," he murmured, almost to himself. Emma slipped off her shoes, placing them neatly by the entrance, feeling the soft carpet beneath her feet. "Do you like wine?" she asked as she headed toward the bar in the living room. Liam nodded, still captivated by the view. When she returned with 2 glasses of red wine, she found Liam standing near a bookshelf, casually examining the rows of neatly arranged books. He seemed intrigued by one but returned it to its place when he noticed her. "You really live at the top of the world," he said, accepting the glass. Emma smiled, but his comment gave her pause. "The top of the world can be lonelier than it seems," she replied, her tone more honest than she had intended. Liam looked at her, and for the first time that night, the light-hearted atmosphere gave way to something deeper. At one point, Liam removed his jacket and draped it over the back of the sofa. As he leaned forward to pick up his glass, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The buckle on his belt was strikingly familiar. She tried to remain composed, but her chest tightened, and as if by magic, she was pulled into a memory from long ago. She saw herself as a young girl, laughing and playing with her beloved father, a kind and gentle man she adored. He had worn that same belt every single day. When she was 15, he had left the house to buy milk and never returned. They had searched everywhere, but he was never found. Liam noticed the change in her demeanor and frowned, concerned. "Are you okay? Do you need a doctor? You just went pale all of a sudden." She struggled to find her voice. "That belt," she began, her words trembling. "What about it?" Liam asked, confused. Emma set her glass down on the table, her eyes locked on the buckle. "Where did you get it?" she asked, urgency creeping into her tone. Liam's brow furrowed, clearly taken aback by her intensity. "It's a long story." "Why? Please, tell me," Emma insisted, her hands trembling now. Liam sighed and began recounting the story of the belt, explaining how it had been a gift from a man he had helped years ago. As he spoke, Emma felt as if the ground beneath her was vanishing. Each detail brought her closer to a conclusion she wasn't sure she was ready to accept. He described the farm where he had grown up and how, on an otherwise ordinary day, he had found a man collapsed near a creek. The man was disheveled, his face covered in scars, and his eyes lost when he finally regained consciousness. He carried no identification, only a few coins in his pocket and that belt strapped to his worn-out pants. "I took him to the nearest hospital," Liam said, taking a sip of his wine. "The doctors said he had lost his memory. He didn't know his own name, where he came from, nothing. I tried to help him remember, but we didn't get anywhere." Emma sat motionless, her eyes fixed on Liam's face as he spoke. Every word was like another piece of a puzzle falling into place, though she feared what the final image might reveal. "After he was discharged, I suggested he go to the police station in the next town over. But honestly, they didn't have many resources there. I think they assumed he was just another homeless man without a family. They offered to send him to a shelter, but I couldn't do it," Liam continued, his gaze drifting as though reliving the moment. Emma swallowed hard. "So what did you do?" "I took him to the farm. He stayed there for years, helping with the work, tending to the animals. He was a quiet man, but very kind. He never remembered who he was, but sometimes I'd see him sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon, as if he was trying to find something in his mind." Liam paused, looking at the belt as if seeing it for the first time in years. "When I decided to move to New York, he insisted I take this with me. He said it was the only thing he had from before he lost his memory, and he wanted me to have it as a token of gratitude." Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes but tried to hold them back. "And where is he now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He's still on the farm. He's old and frail now, but he has a caregiver who stays with him full-time. He lives in the house that used to belong to my parents. I couldn't bring myself to sell it, Emma couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She brought her hand to her mouth, struggling to process everything she had just heard. Liam noticed her reaction, his brow furrowing in concern. "Emma, are you okay? Did I say something wrong?" She shook her head, unable to speak for a few moments. Finally, she took a deep breath and managed to whisper, "That man, I think he's my father." Liam's eyes widened, the shock on his face mirroring her own. What do you mean?" Emma rose from the sofa, pacing back and forth. "My father disappeared when I was 15. He went out to buy milk and never came back. The police investigated, but they never found anything. Years later, they declared him dead, but I never accepted it." She looked at Liam, tears now streaming freely down her face. "That belt, he wore it every single day. I recognized it the moment I saw it. It's the same." Liam sat in silence for a moment, trying to piece everything together. "Are you sure? Could be a coincidence." Emma shook her head firmly, her determination unwavering. "It's not a coincidence. It's him. I have to see him." "Okay," he said. "But first, let me show you a picture of him on my phone. See if you recognize him." Emma took the phone hesitantly, her hands trembling as she stared at the screen. Her breath hitched. It was him. It was the confirmation she needed. Liam felt the weight of Emma's realization and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. The silence in the room was almost tangible, broken only by the muffled sounds of the city outside the window. He watched as Emma continued pacing, her hands shaking as she tried to process the flood of emotions overwhelming her. "Emma," he said, his voice softer and more cautious than before, "you need to be prepared. He's not the same man anymore. I mean, he lost his memory. I don't know if he'll remember you or who he used to be." "I don't care," she said resolutely. "It doesn't matter if he doesn't remember me. I just need to see him. I need to know he's alive, that he's okay. He meant everything to me. I grew up clinging to the hope that one day I'd find him. Then we'll go. Tomorrow morning. It's not a short trip, but we'll get there." Emma felt an immediate sense of relief, knowing he was alive and that she now had a chance to see her beloved father, to hold him, to smell the scent that had lingered in her memory for years. She stepped closer to Liam, took his hand for a moment, and murmured, "Thank you. I don't even know how to thank you for this." "You don't have to," he replied with a soft smile. "We'll do this together." That night, Emma immersed herself in her thoughts as she packed for the trip. A small bag with comfortable clothes was easy enough, but she spent the most time carefully selecting items she wanted to bring for her father. Old photos, small mementos from her childhood, things that might help him remember who he was. Meanwhile, Liam sat quietly, reflecting on everything that had unfolded. He never imagined that a simple, chance encounter at a bar would lead him to such an emotional and complicated journey. The idea of witnessing a potential reunion between Emma and her father stirred something within him, more deeply than he cared to admit. Emma and Liam sat on the couch, talking about everything they had uncovered, caught in a whirlwind of emotions that felt almost impossible to believe. Exhausted, Emma couldn't resist and fell asleep on Liam's lap. With a serene smile, he began to gently run his fingers through her hair, his touch tender and almost reverent. He watched her as she slept, captivated by her beauty and the calming presence she radiated. "How is this happening to me?" he wondered, his mind swirling with emotions he had never felt before. Without realizing it, fatigue overcame him as well. There, beside her, Liam drifted off to sleep. When he woke, the first thought that crossed his mind was, "Is this all just a dream?" But the comforting warmth of her body next to his was real. Emma awakened something in Liam that he couldn't quite define, a blend of admiration, desire, and a strange sense of peace. Butterflies fluttered in his stomach, and he knew that being near her was changing something deep within him. Gently, Liam woke her. Emma opened her eyes slowly, still wrapped in the haze of sleep. She stood, tidied her hair, and composed herself before returning to the room. When she saw him standing there, waiting for her, she couldn't resist. She embraced him tightly, a hug that needed no words but said everything. Gratitude and deep affection. At dawn, they set off. The road was long, flanked by vast fields and gentle hills that emerged as they left the bustling city behind. In the car, Emma gazed out the window, restless, while Liam drove with steady calm, occasionally glancing at her with concern. The farm is pretty remote, Liam explained. Not many people pass through there. That's how he's been able to live in peace for so long. Did you visit him often? Emma asked, breaking the silence. At first, yes, Liam replied. But after I moved to New York, the visits became less frequent. I always called his caregiver, though, to make sure he was okay. Emma nodded, trying to picture the man who had cared for her father all those years. Despite her overwhelming gratitude, she couldn't shake the anxiety about how the reunion would unfold. When they finally saw the farm in the distance, Emma's heart began to race. The house, simple but well-kept, stood atop a hill surrounded by green fields and trees. Liam pulled the car to a stop and turned off the engine, looking at her. "Ready?" he asked. Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I've never been more ready." Liam approached the house and called out for Henry, whose hearing had diminished with age. With a nervous smile, he waved his hand to catch his attention. "Henry, I have something very important to tell you. It's a surprise. After all these years, I've finally found something about your past." "Someone special," Liam said, his voice steady but full of emotion. Henry furrowed his brow, his face a mix of curiosity and disbelief. His expression bore the weight of someone who had long stopped expecting life to bring any big changes. "Someone special? About my past?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Liam nodded, stepping closer. "Yes, your daughter, Henry." The old man froze, the words seeming to echo without meaning for a moment. "My daughter? How is that possible?" "I have a daughter," he murmured, his voice trembling with a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. Liam met his gaze with unwavering certainty and called out to Emma, who had been waiting anxiously by the entrance. When she saw Henry, she couldn't hold back her tears. She ran to him, wrapping him in a tight embrace, sobbing on his shoulder with all the pent-up emotion of years of longing and absence. For a moment, Henry was paralyzed, but then his eyes filled with tears. He returned the hug with all his strength, feeling a profound connection that, despite being lost for so long, was still alive. After they had calmed down, Henry and Emma sat side by side in chairs on the porch of the house. Emma took a small photo album from her bag and began showing it to him. Images of a past Henry hadn't known he had began to surface. Then, like a bolt of lightning, something inside him unlocked. "My God! I remember. My memory. It's back. It's her." "It really is her," Henry murmured, the words escaping like a sigh. "My daughter." His hands trembled as he touched the photos. Emma's face brought a flood of memories he thought were lost forever. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks as he whispered, "Forgive me, my girl. Forgive me for disappearing and leaving you all alone." Emma held his hands tightly, her eyes fixed on his, full of understanding and love. Then, with a trembling voice, Henry began to recount the story that had taken him away from his family. "I remember what happened, as if it had just occurred. I was going out to buy milk. It was an ordinary day. On the way, I saw a bear, and without thinking, I ran. I ended up near a lake and jumped into the water to escape. But the current was strong. I hit my head on a rock and blacked out. When I woke up, I was on the riverbank with no memory of who I was or where I had come from." Henry paused, his voice faltering with emotion. "After that, I only remember wandering aimlessly for days until Liam found me on the farm where I've lived ever since. Liam was an angel who saved my life, The reunion between father and daughter was brimming with emotion, as though a missing piece of both their lives had finally been returned. The connection between them felt like a miracle, a gift of fate that had brought them back together after so many years apart. "You've grown so much," he said, his voice still shaky but filled with admiration. "My little girl, now a woman," Emma smiled through her tears. "And I always thought of you. I always hoped to find you." The caregiver entered the room discreetly, carrying a tray with more tea. Liam followed her, keeping a respectful distance to allow them their moment. As Emma's father spoke, he seemed to regain clarity little by little, as if having her there was helping him piece his memories back together. "I didn't remember anything for so long," he began, staring into the distance. "Sometimes it felt like I knew something was missing, but I couldn't figure out what it was. When Liam found me, all I had was the belt. It was my only connection to who I used to be." Emma swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I recognized the belt immediately. It felt like it was a part of you, something I never forgot." His words brought a mix of pain and relief to Emma. They offered a glimpse of the life she had imagined for years, but also confirmed the suffering he had endured. "Did you never try to come back?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to look for. When Liam brought me to the farm, I thought that was it, that I would live and die there, never remembering. But seeing you now, it feels like everything is coming back, piece by piece." Liam, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. He always talked about flashes, images of a life he couldn't quite grasp. But we could never connect the dots. Emma turned to Liam, her gratitude evident in her eyes. "You did more for him than I ever could have. You saved him when he needed it most." Liam looked away, slightly uncomfortable. "I didn't do anything special. He was like family. I just did what anyone would." Emma's father reached for Liam's hand again, his eyes brimming with tears. "You brought me back to her, Liam. That's more than I could ever ask for." They talked for hours, unaware of how much time had passed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emma and her father sat together on the porch of the farmhouse. The caregiver brought out a blanket to keep the elderly man warm, his frail figure appearing even more delicate in the soft evening light. Emma sat beside him, holding his hand as the gentle breeze tousled her loose hair. "You always loved watching the sunset," he said, breaking the silence. His voice was steadier now, as if the reunion had restored some of his vitality. "I remember how you'd insist I stop working and sit with you, just to watch the sky change colors." Emma smiled, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "I never forgot. It was the most special time of the day for me because it was when you'd finally stop everything and just be with me." He looked at her with a mix of sadness and love. "I'm so sorry for leaving you alone, Emma. If I had known, if I could have remembered, I would have come back to you no matter what it took." "It wasn't your fault," she replied, squeezing his hand gently. "Life separated us, but what matters is that we're together again now." Liam stood leaning against the doorframe, quietly observing the two of them. He didn't want to interrupt, but the scene before him made him realize how much Emma had changed since he first met her. The powerful, composed woman he had met at the bar now appeared vulnerable, but also more connected and genuine than ever. From that moment, a new chapter began. After the intense emotions of the day, Henry, visibly tired, retired to bed, leaving Emma and Liam alone under the starlit sky. The two remained on the porch, where the gentle breeze carried the scent of the night. Between them, there was a growing connection, an inexplicable pull drawing them closer to each other. They talked for hours, but each word seemed to hold deeper meaning, as though the universe had conspired to bring them together in that moment. Emma suggested they sit on the grass, where the moonlight bathed everything in a silvery glow. As they settled down, she rested her head softly on Liam's shoulder. In response, he intertwined his fingers with hers, feeling the warmth of her hand like an electric current running through his body. They sat in silence for a while, a comfortable silence, full of unspoken emotions. But their exchanged glances said it all. There was something between them, an attraction so powerful that no words could contain it. Liam turned slightly toward her, his hand slowly rising to touch her face. His fingers traced a delicate path, feeling the softness of her skin. Their eyes met, and for a few seconds the world seemed to stop. He gazed at her with such intensity that Emma felt her heart race, as if everything around them had disappeared, leaving only the two of them. "Emma," Liam whispered, his voice thick with emotion and desire. Before she could respond, he leaned in slowly, giving her the chance to pull away if she wanted. But she didn't. Instead, she moved closer, her eyes fluttering shut as their lips met in a kiss. The first touch was soft, exploratory, but the intensity grew quickly. It was a kiss full of passion, tenderness, and everything they hadn't realized they'd been waiting for. Liam's lips pressed against Emma's with an overwhelming sweetness, and she responded with equal fervor. Her hands moved up, tangling in his hair, while he held her face delicately, as though she was the most precious thing he had ever touched. In that moment, it felt as if they had been transported to another dimension. The earth disappeared beneath their feet, and they floated, as though gravity had lost its grip on them. The kiss enveloped them completely, merging their worlds and sealing the beginning of something neither of them could ever deny. When they finally pulled away, just enough to look into each other's eyes, they were both slightly breathless, their hearts beating in perfect harmony. Emma smiled, her face glowing with both moonlight and happiness. She began, but the words seemed to escape her. Liam finished her thought, smiling as he stroked her cheek. The beginning of everything. That night, under the starlight and the moon's watchful gaze, the couple sealed the start of a new life. A life where the past had guided them, but the future was theirs to build together. Emma felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of security she hadn't experienced in a long time. Without thinking, she took his hand. "I don't know where this will take us, Liam, but I want to find out with you." He smiled, intertwining his fingers with hers. In that moment, Emma realized her life had changed forever. For the first time, she felt no fear, only hope. Emma and Liam began a new chapter together, knowing that fate had been generous with them. Emma brought her father to the city so she could be close to him and care for him in the best way possible. Once a month, they returned to the farm to breathe the fresh country air and enjoy family moments together. Emma and Liam's relationship grew stronger each day, and they shared a beautiful life together, filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a future they would face hand in hand. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to subscribe. A big hug, and see you in the next video.